Hello, everyone, and good evening. My name's Don Arleth, and you're watching World News Tonight here on TVP World. Tonight, we'll take a look at the increasingly bitter political rhetoric between Warsaw and Budapest. We'll also discuss Mike Pompeo's peace plan for a potential Trump administration. That'll be later in the program, but first up, let's take a look at the latest headlines. Kyiv prepares itself for peace talks. After a dozen killed in Israel, tensions are peaking with Hezbollah. Poland gets its first medal in the K1 canoe slalom. An oil storage depot in the Kursk region of Russia caught fire in what local officials described as a Ukrainian-launched drone attack. Our Ukraine correspondent, Oz Katerji, joins us live from Kyiv with the latest. Good evening, Oz. Now, has there been any confirmation by Ukrainian authorities about the strike being done by Ukraine?
Yeah, so the SBU announced in a statement in cooperation with the Ukrainian armed forces that they conducted a strike in the Kursk region of Russia, Polyova oil depot there. They targeted that, and according to the Russian authorities, there were several fires that required several crews to put out in that specific refinery. It's believed to have 11 oil depots there. We believe 3 were on fire. That's according to the Russian regional governor. So, take that with a grain of salt, as it were. Now, this comes, as you said, that Zelensky had spoken of a peace plan proposal that they're finalizing in November. It's important to say that it's been a really difficult weekend for Ukraine. Zelensky himself said that Ukraine had sustained over 700 aerial bombs and 100 Shahed drones launched at Ukraine by the Russians in the last week. Now, in the last 24 hours, 11 Ukrainians have been killed in Russian attacks and 41 others injured. So there really is a daily death toll happening here, with these strikes really degrading Ukraine's capability to defend itself. So Zelensky really is pushing again more for more means to shoot down these missiles, particularly in the air defense area.
It certainly seems like Kyiv's going to need them. Well, thank you very much, Oz Katerji, for your report. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced this weekend that he will prepare a peace plan by November. Details of the plan haven't yet been made public. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has been ongoing for almost 2.5 years now, with no end in sight.
President Zelensky made the announcement during the interview with Japanese NHK. He said peace won't be achievable while Russia is occupying Ukrainian territories, although he did say what's needed to get there.
Patience, support and diplomatic pressure are the 3 factors for a just end to the war. If the US and European nations maintain unity, it will be added pressure and show Moscow that there is no chance.
But Europe is far from unified in its approach to the war. Most EU nations agree on the unwavering support for Ukraine. Hungary's Viktor Orban, on the other hand, went rogue on his own peace mission in the beginning of July. He met with both Russian President Vladimir Putin and China's leader Xi Jinping. Ukraine followed up with its own diplomatic efforts and sent Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba to meet with his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi.
It's good for our image. For Ukraine, it's good to be seen to be pressing the Chinese to become involved as an enabler of the peace search for peace settlement. I think that for both sides, Ukrainians and Chinese, this was an important meeting in the sense that it sent the kind of signal, the kind of message to the outside world that both capitals wanted to send.
Peace in Ukraine has also been one of the major talking points of former US President Donald Trump, who hopes to get re-elected this November, the very same month President Zelensky announced as the due date for his own peace plan.
First of all, Trump does not have a plan for Ukraine, except that he says he will stop the war in 24 hours, which everybody sort of assumed that it means stopping all the assistance to Ukraine and letting Russia take it over.
Just over a week ago, President Zelensky shocked everyone by saying he would be willing to talk peace with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He previously refused to negotiate with the Russian leader. The desired peace is still very far away, though, as Russia continues its brutal invasion of Ukraine.
And now moving on to growing political tensions between Poland and Hungary after Viktor Orban's harsh words about Poland being hypocritical in its dealings with Moscow. The Polish deputy foreign minister fired back, saying that it is Hungary that does business with Russia. The conflict raises questions about the future of the Visegrad Four.
While in Romania, the Hungarian Prime Minister did not spare harsh words towards the West.
Europe is doing nothing more than unconditionally following the foreign policy of the US Democratic Party, even at the cost of self-sabotage.
We have no other ally or partner, not a single one, that similarly overtly and tirelessly campaigns for a specific candidate in an election in the United States of America, seemingly convinced that no matter what, it only helps Hungary, or at least helps him personally. I'm not sure which.
Orban also said that Poland, quote, has kicked Hungary's backside enough.
The Poles are practicing the most hypocritical and sanctimonious politics of all of Europe. They morally lecture us, criticize us for our economic relations with the Russians, and meanwhile they unashamedly do business with the Russians and buy oil through intermediaries, running the Polish economy with it.
Experts believe that Orban is just being a populist. That's because the speech was given in a majority ethnic Hungarian town on an event known as a meeting of the supporters of Fidesz, that is, Orban's party.
This speech was intended to be divisive. This speech was intended to call attention, probably all the possible attention it can get. And therefore, probably I would not overreact because this is exactly the goal of the speaker.
However, the Polish government did react strongly to these words.
We do not do business with Russia, unlike Prime Minister Orban. Orban is on the margins of international society, that is, both in the European Union and NATO.
Both Hungary and Poland are part of a group known as the Visegrad Four. Together with Slovakia and the Czech Republic, the four once united in their efforts to overcome the Soviet influence and to integrate with Western institutions. However, there is now visible division inside the group.
Hungary views European Commission and let's say progressive elites as a common enemy, while on the other hand, Poland and Czech Republic are viewing Russia as the major threat to Central Europe. We have to, and Slovakia is sort of a fence-sitter.
I don't really understand why Hungary wants to remain a member of organizations they don't like so much and which supposedly treat them badly. Why don't they form a union with Putin and with some other authoritarian states? If one doesn't want to be a member of some club, they can always quit it.
Apart from being well known for his relations with Vladimir Putin, it was Viktor Orban who was blocking the EU's aid for Ukraine, making Hungary the only member state opposing it. That's not to mention the ongoing disputes with the European Commission over the rule of law in the country.
And we'll be discussing this towards the end of the program with our guest tonight, and that is Jan Zielonka from Oxford University, so stay with us. As the funerals for most of the 12 Druze children killed in the presumed to be Hezbollah rocket attack in Majdal Shams in the Golan Heights took place today. Meanwhile, Israel's security cabinet convened to discuss retaliation efforts while Hezbollah has raised its alert levels. We now cross live to our correspondent in Tel Aviv, Diana Skaya, for the most recent updates in the situation there on the ground. Hello, Diana. Good evening. Can you give us an update on the situation, what it looks like? Will the tensions with Hezbollah and Lebanon escalate?
Good evening, Don. Well, first of all, right now, let me take you through a little what the IDF has just published in a little under an hour ago. First of all, there was talks as to whether some Arab media was reporting that what actually killed those children at the soccer field in northern Israel was an Iron Dome, the Iron Dome missile, an Israeli missile. However, the IDF has published under an hour ago that proof that it was a of course, an Iranian rocket launched from the Sheba area from southern Lebanon. It showed the route, its trajectory, posted it on social media as well. Also published pictures of the shrapnel, of the shrapnel from the rocket. Now, of course, these funerals were held for 11 out of the 12 children. Now, what we do know, first of all, is that Hezbollah first said it had launched a rocket towards Majd al-Shams. Later on, when it found out of the civilian casualties, it took away that report, particularly when the names started coming in. Now, Don, we're not talking about Jewish names. We're talking about Arab Druze community names. We're talking about 12 kids who speak Arabic. Hezbollah knows very well this is a Druze community that's going on their border. Now, what we do know is that, first of all, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu cut his Washington trip short. He did land back in Israel a little after 4 p.m. today. He has convened in the security cabinet, which is still in talks right now. Now, what we do know, as also Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said, is that Israel's response is going to be a harsh one. Now, we do know that the United States, France, the UN as well is really trying to kind of push Israel as to not retaliate and to stay silent. However, since the 8th of October, Hezbollah has launched some 600 rockets, if not more than that, onto Israeli territory. Now, of course, this being the biggest one, especially from the Druze community, saying we're talking about now 11 kids, 12 kids that have died from Hezbollah rocket fire. We don't know the full details of Israel's retaliation. What we do know is that since then, Israeli media reports that they have already launched several retaliatory strikes back in Lebanon. However, as the story unfolds and develops, most likely Israel will definitely not stand down.
Certainly. Well, Diana Skaya, thank you for that reporting live for us from Tel Aviv. Thank you. World leaders fear the recent exchange of fire between Israel and Lebanon's Hezbollah could lead to further escalation. Both the United States and the United Kingdom officials called for restraint from Israel, at the same time condemning the strike on an Israeli school, which killed at least 12 people.
The war in Gaza has already been a major headache for Western leaders since its outbreak last October. Now they are concerned a new war could be brewing in the region.
One of the reasons that we're continuing to work so hard for a ceasefire in Gaza is not just for Gaza, but also so that we can really unlock an opportunity to bring calm, lasting calm, across the blue line between Israel and Lebanon.
Since the beginning of the war, Israel has been exchanging fire with Hezbollah, a radical Islamic terrorist group in Lebanon. It also recently conducted its first retaliatory strike on Yemen's Houthi, who have been targeting Israel with drones since last October. While Hezbollah has been firing at Israel on a regular basis for the past several months, this particular strike killed at least 12 children. This fact alone could cause the existing conflict to expand.
This is Hezbollah we are talking about, Iran's proxy in the region. Hezbollah will not be cleared of this event despite its ridiculous denials. It committed this strike and it will bear a heavy price for its actions.
One of Hezbollah's biggest supporters, Iran, immediately condemned Israel's retaliation.
The Zionist regime is not a state, it is a criminal gang. It is a gang of criminals, murderers and terrorists.
While Iran is throwing strong words at Israel, Egypt declared its support for Lebanon, adding its desire to avoid war. World leaders fear a full-scale conflict between Israel and Lebanon could lead to another Arab Spring, an all-out war in the entire Middle East.
With just over 3 months left to garner as much support as possible, Donald Trump has begun courting a group he previously ridiculed back in 2021, the crypto community. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris is reportedly on the verge of choosing her running mate, with sources saying that she has narrowed the list of possible VP picks down to just 3 names.
The race is on. With a considerable head start, Donald Trump has not only rallied the groups that are the most likely to vote for him,
Christians, get out and vote just this time,
but also the ones that have previously chosen to side with the Democrats.
Hello, Bitcoiners. Thank you very much. Hello, it's good to be with you. If crypto is going to define the future, I want to be mined, minted, and made in the USA. It's going to be. It's not going to be made anywhere else. And if Bitcoin is going to the moon, as we say, it's going to the moon, I want America to be the nation that leads the way, and that's what's going to happen. No, you're going to be very happy with me.
As it stands, the average of all national presidential election polls shows Trump at 47% of support, nearly 2% higher than his rival, Kamala Harris. The VP-turned-Democrat candidate has a lot of catching up to do in terms of campaigning.
We have a fight ahead of us. We've got a fight ahead of us. And we are the underdogs in this race, okay? Level set. We're the underdogs in this race. In this election, we each face a question. What kind of country do we want to live in?
If that wasn't enough, she also has less than 2 weeks to name a running mate to align with the Democratic Party's plan to virtually nominate a ticket by that date. While her campaign team is still vetting potential candidates, they narrowed the list to 3 names. These are Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. All 3 of them were chosen based on being able to sway voters in swing states, with Walz being the most likely candidate according to sources. With just over 3 months left of campaigning, both Harris and Trump are doing everything in their power to appeal to as many voters as possible.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken alongside U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin are in Japan discussing deepening security and defense ties with their Japanese counterparts. This includes talks about extended deterrence, a term used to describe the U.S. commitment to use its nuclear forces to deter attacks on its allies.
With regional security more unstable than ever, Japan decided to call on their American allies for help in bolstering their defenses. And for the first time ever, these talks will include the topic of extended deterrence.
The PRC, Russia, and North Korea continue to threaten global security with their increasing emphasis on nuclear capabilities. So our extended deterrence relationship is more important than ever.
Nuclear weapons aren't the only way Washington is planning on upping its military presence in Japan. The U.S. Forces Japan, or USFJ for short, is also due for renovations, the biggest of their kind in over half a decade.
The United States will upgrade the U.S. Forces Japan to a joint force headquarters with expanded missions and operational responsibilities. Now, this will be the most significant change to U.S. Forces Japan since its creation.
This means that the USFJ will be assigned new military officers with commanding authority. What that leads to is quicker responses and decisions, as the USFJ will no longer have to seek the approval of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command in Hawaii to carry out their operations. These changes are set to be finalized by March of next year, significantly bolstering the security of Japan and other countries in the region that are allied with Washington.
Poland's Klaudia Zwolinska won a silver medal in the K1 canoe slalom event at the Olympic Games in Paris. This is not the only Polish success, as the women's volleyball team defeated Japan 3-1 in their Olympic opener. The Poles will advance to the quarterfinals should they defeat Kenya on Wednesday. Here's more on the Olympic Games.
This blurry picture will now be a symbol of Klaudia Zwolinska's success. She took second place in the K1 canoe slalom event. In the final, she was overtaken only by Australia's Jessica Fox. This is the first medal for Poland in Paris.
Don't look at me or I'll just burst into tears. I'm so happy I don't know what to say. Everything I planned at the beginning of this competition worked out. It's a technical sport. Mistakes are made, especially at the Olympics. But I approached it all with humility.
The women's volleyball tournament has brought the fans many joyful moments as well, as they haven't seen the Polish team at the Olympics for the past 16 years. The Japanese team, on the other hand, appears regularly at the event.
All the girls are ready in the same way, who starts, who get in, and this is super important, and probably they are like this because they feel supported by themselves, one each other, and that is great.
In the first-round match of the Olympic tennis tournament, Poland's Magda Linette defeated the higher-ranked Mirra Andreeva, a Russian player competing under a neutral flag. Linette beat Andreeva in straight sets, 6-3, 6-4. There's more matchups on the way for Polish athletes. The semi-finals of the 100-meter backstroke swimming event with the participation of Ksawery Masiuk kicks off at 9:32 p.m. CET.
And now, joining me to discuss Polish-Hungarian relations and the Trump peace deal proposed by former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is Professor of European Studies at Oxford University, Jan Zielonka. Hello, and thank you very much for joining me on World News Tonight.
Good evening.
Now, Viktor Orban criticized Poland for being hypocritical in its policies towards Kyiv and Moscow while fueling the economy with Russian oil. Let's start off with that piece coming out from Viktor Orban. What are your thoughts on this? Is there any shred of truth to that statement?
Viktor Orban likes to provoke, and Polish government currently it's its prime object. Everybody knows that he had a very friendly relationship with the previous government, and of course it was expected that he is going to say things like this about a true democratic government which acts and thinks differently than Mr. Orban.
But yes, but even the previous Polish government has completely shunned Viktor Orban. They've parted ways when the war in Ukraine began, the full-scale invasion. So regardless of who's in power here in Poland, it seems that Poland and Hungary have drifted very far apart. Would you agree?
Oh, yes, but they are drifting apart for some time. Although the previous government could agree on domestic politics, how you basically launch anti-liberal revolution. They never agreed on external policies, particularly policies towards Russia and Ukraine. Orban courts Russia for a long time, and none of the Polish governments has attempted to do this.
Now, Viktor Orban is also not happy with being lectured by Warsaw, as he calls it. How has Polish diplomacy changed towards Hungary? Is it now in Poland's national interest to, in fact, oppose Viktor Orban and his policies?
Well, Poland should distance itself, and it has done so, from policies of Viktor Orban. And I think it's time that Hungarian membership of the European Union and NATO is being re-examined. I understand the rules that there is no way to simply kick out a member state from these organizations, but there are ways of reducing the influence and particularly access to resources. I never could understand why Viktor Orban was able to build up his personal Hungarian empire to some extent with the help of the European money.
Interesting. Now, with Viktor Orban, as you mentioned, he's constantly demonizing NATO when it comes to Russia and the EU for a whole host of issues. Do either of these organizations even need Hungary at this point? Poland has been keen to put in the public discourse the idea, or at least floating the idea, that neither NATO nor the European Union needs Hungary, and so why should it be a part of either one?
Well, I would say one thing at a time. I think the European Union should first bring Hungary and Viktor Orban government to justice for violating basic principle of European law. They should also, and they actually do it more effectively, distance themselves from private initiatives of Viktor Orban on the European level, misusing the positions of rotating presidency. But the problem, of course, is that at the decision-making table in the European Council, there are sitting heads of states who do not want to be outvoted by the majority on other matters. And as long as the unanimity principle stands within the European Union on most crucial matters, we can expect that either Mr. Orban or another petty dictator would try to misuse the veto power.
Moving on now, I'd like to just talk a little bit about this Trump peace plan for Ukraine, an op-ed that appeared in the Wall Street Journal, penned by former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and former Trump advisor David Orban. It seems like the most refreshing plan to have come out of the Trump camp thus far. What parts of the plan do you believe are tenable, and which plans are a more hopeful or more of a pipe dream?
Well, I believe that there will not be peace unless there will be an agreement of the Ukrainian government. And Ukrainian government has some red lines which they cannot cross without being basically removed by their own people. And this has to be understood by those who want to make peace above Ukraine's head. Yes, Ukraine is dependent on Western help, American in particular, but it doesn't mean that eventual President Trump can negotiate without acquiescence of Ukraine a deal with Russia over a country which is sovereign.
Right. Well, looking back at the potential peace plan that was put forward by some members of the America First organization there in the United States, basically had us assuming that Trump would make them sit at the table and negotiate at all costs. But looking at this peace plan, there are several very positive elements, such as zero territorial concessions, which I think would fit the bill for Ukraine, very much so. Imposing real sanctions on Russia that can't be dodged or that are considered right now to be too weak. Trying to corner Russia out of the global oil market, bulking up the defense industry in the United States, creating a $500 billion Lend-Lease program for Ukraine, removing the restrictions for Ukraine to use certain weapons and at certain distances, as well as setting up a $100 billion weapons facility mainly funded by European nations and letting Ukraine join NATO once a peace can be forged. Those sound like very good propositions, especially when we put that in comparison to the Biden administration, which has yet to formulate a strategy for victory.
Well, first of all, the victory of Trump is not prejudged. We don't know who will win those elections. They certainly will be close. And I wouldn't dismiss Kamala Harris' chances to win those elections, point one. Point two, since beginning of the full-scale Russian invasion on Ukraine, there were numerous peace plans flagged by various statesmen and independent organizations, and they all came to nothing, because it is not only that you have to negotiate with Ukraine, it is also you need to bring Russia to the table. How many times President Macron talked to President Putin? He tried to convince him to some kind of settlement it didn't work. Why do we think that anybody else would be in a better position to bring those parties together on terms which basically are either unacceptable for one or another? It is easier said than done, and I wouldn't give too much attention to those speculations. At the end, conflicts always end up one way or another, and there is a kind of a peace settlement. But I don't think we can prejudge it at the moment when we simply do not know basic elements of what politics in Russia, Ukraine, America, and Europe will bring about.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jan Zielonka, Professor of European Studies at Oxford University, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us here on World News Tonight. And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thanks for watching, and stay with us for more here on TVP World.